asking people for money. Kids be knowing this. I'm a kid. And I'm supposed to be knowing all this stuff.
You're a smart kid.
See, I'm supposed to be knowing about all these guns. I know about all bad stuff. Something to know about. I'm supposed to be learning about school. At least I know about school stuff. I know my numbers, but people need to stop killing each other.
When I grow up, I want to be a singer. It's been a long day without you, my friend. And I'll tell you all about it when I see you. But I wish my father Steph was here to see me sing. But he was murdered November 14, 2012. When I grow up, I want to be a football player.
Don't give up, keep going, keep going, keep going.
But it's sad my dad Drew won't see me because he got murdered December 28, 2009.
My name is Terrence, and I wish I had a relationship with my father like I had with my son. But unfortunately, my father, Terrence, known as Tubbsy, was murdered on February 23, 1991 in South Philadelphia.
My name is Dee. My son Montrell sure loved basketball. I wish he was here with me watching this game, but he was murdered on January 9th, 2014.
I wish my dad, by Sean School, was here to welcome to school. But he was murdered October 1st, 2009.
This is what's happening to young lives every day.
Why? Don't we matter? Please just put the guns down. Do it for us, please.
Greetings and welcome to another powerful edition of the Community Defender Talk Show, one powerful hour of truth, dispelling falsehood. I'm your host, Brother Darrell Muhammad.
And I'm Sister Deborah Muhammad. Welcome to the Community Defender Talk Show.
And of course, we want to deal with the topic of fratricidal violence. And, you know, we looked up the word fratricide, and it means to kill one's brother or sister. And too much of this is going on in the black community, where, well, if it's one life lost, it's too much. But it's to the point that we can't keep up with it. You know, Baton Rouge has now passed up New Orleans for the past few months in terms of murders. There's been a spike in homicides in New Iberia, places, small towns where, you know, people, everybody knows everybody else, and yet for some unknown reason, in a lot of these places, we can't seem to get together and talk. We have to separate and shoot. And it's those kinds of disheartening things that we want to highlight on today's program. Of course, we know that a rapper by the name of G Money was murdered in the city of Baton Rouge. And before him, there was another rapper by the name of Nussie that was murdered. And very oftentimes, a lot of these rappers, up-and-coming rappers, get murdered in a lot of times their hometowns. And so it's just, I guess, emblematic of the fact that we as a people have a difficult time getting along and loving one another. Now, Sister Deborah, you were very much involved in the planning and execution of what was put on by the Nation of Islam, very successful in Baton Rouge, called the Alton Sterling Weekend, where Minister Nuri came down. And we had a host of different events all over the city of Baton Rouge to highlight Alton Sterling's murder, where he was shot 3 times in the chest and flipped over and shot 3 times in the back on video. And all of that really, it hit us to the core, that this could happen on video and there would be any debate or discussion about what should happen to the person who did it. But since that time, there have been dozens of black men murdered by other black men or murdered in the black community, and lots of them unsolved. And I'm thinking that the majority of these murders have been unsolved, meaning we don't know, there's been nobody arrested, so on and so forth. And so when we work to highlight the injustice that happens to our people from outside, we must also work to make sure that injustice does not happen us against one another on the inside. Because if black lives are going to matter, they must matter to us first. I have to not want to shoot you. You have to not want to shoot me. If we call each other brother, we have to act like it and treat one another as that. I don't know if somebody who's like you and myself and others who've worked hard to facilitate unity in our community. What are your thoughts as you see all of these events unfolding literally all over the United States in large cities as well as small towns?
Well, yes, thank you, Brother Darrell. And before I get off into the actual fratricidal dilemma that we find ourselves in the black community, I just want to put something out there. Some people may call it conspiracy theory and whatnot. And, when you said that with the Alton Sterling murder, that, of course, the police officers, were not indicted, and so there's no person that's responsible for that. And some of the killings with black men in particular in the cities, in major cities, small towns, in Monroe where I work, there's a spike in murders there as well, without them being solved. One time I heard that in places like in Chicago, that you have a lot of these unsolved murders. Mm-hmm. And there are some people that think that perhaps there's a bigger plot that's going on in these communities, just like you remember that movie, it wasn't Drop Squad, it was a movie where they were dropping one gang member off and another. The police were actually involved in this.
That was something on a movie, but more importantly, it's something that happened in reality.
And see, this is where I want to go with this first,
yeah,
because we have to deal with both issues.
Mm-hmm.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that wherever we see conflict in the world, we know that there is usually an outside source that is pushing up this. Mm-hmm. The situation happens from large countries. We have Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where they talk about how that the IMF and a lot of these other large CIA and all these other organizations will go into large countries and cause division among groups. Okay, mm-hmm. And so they would give something a little bit more to one group than the other, may give guns to one and may divide, give limited resources for both and give one to guns or resources to the one that they want to be in control. And so therefore you create an artificial conflict. But, the same thing, the same tricks are done on a micro level, where in these communities, you may have, and it's been found, that you have police officers that are involved in the drug, trade and trafficking in these communities, where they may give one group of young black men some drugs to sell, and then, they support one group, and of course, because they're causing an artificial conflict to exist. So we can't dismiss the tricks and machinations of the devil, because it's real. The devil is real, and it's not somebody under the ground. These are real entities. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave a lecture series, and a lecture in particular. He did Stop the Killing, but he did a lecture called Justifiable Homicide. And so you create an artificial situation, then you go into that artificial situation and you come like you're offering a solution. And so I want to put that out there first. And so that's one thing that we have to always keep in mind whenever there's conflict, that there's a cause, there's a law of cause and effect, and there may be a cause underneath that we don't see. So I just want to say that first, okay? And then secondly, because in the throes of slavery, we didn't treat one another the way that we do now, and we know that we had limited resources, right? We know that we had lack of education, formal education. We know that, that a lot of the conditions that exist today existed much worse than they do now, but we didn't have the hatred for one another as we do now. So always keep that in mind. Now, what's our responsibility? Or what's in the community that we have to look at? Of course, we have to take responsibility. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is teaching us, that we should make our community decent places to live. And if people have adequate resources, okay, if they have access to the things that we need to have a decent life, you won't find those things happening in our community. So we have to take control of what goes on in our community, and we have to be responsible for how we handle one another. How the churches and the mosque and all those organizations have to be instrumental in dealing with what's going on in the community. We can't have a church on every corner and not, mitigate some of the beefs among people. Some of the things are legitimate. We were in the restaurant the other night and we heard that at a family gathering that somebody, and they said it was a black male, that he was acting other than himself, and then that they asked him to leave, and so they called the police out. We have to figure out how to resolve our conflicts among ourselves without bringing other people in to bear. So, those are just some opening thoughts that I had on that topic.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and take this call. Go ahead and call you on behalf of the community defender.
Good evening, Brother Darren, Sister Deborah. I definitely appreciate the subject matter tonight, Brother Darren. And I want to chime in on Sister Deborah. Sister Deborah hit the nail on the head. I couldn't say it so much better. Here in, let's say, in this area, in the city of New Iberia, Brother Darren, you know the problems. Historically, you and Sister Deborah with the Iberia Parish Sheriff Department, law enforcement, going back some 20 years. And now we have these issues with these killings in New Iberia. 11, apparently from the data I got, 11 murders in the last year and a half or so. I give or take a few months. I don't have the accurate data, but be sure that there have been a number of killings over 10. And most of them are young black males. Well, most of them are not solved. 8, as we know, have not been solved. And these are young people. Okay. Now, recently, the new mayor of New Iberia, the new mayor since earlier part of this year, came to the black community for a town hall meeting to discuss supposedly public safety issues. And I want to tell the people who listen, Brother Darrell, they got people who listen, even though the cable company and local government finds ways to black out the community defender in the city of New Iberia. The word still gets out about the community defender truth. And even though they black you that out, the public do not vote for another tax. The mayor has nerve to come into the black community to ask for a tax. In fact, that they had some very serious issues with Iberia Parish Sheriff Department, which ran so many years. He did not show up even when he was running for office. None of the city councils said, "Look, we got a problem with law enforcement. We need to fix this." They never came. But they came only because they wanted to push a tax. Now, just like Sister Deborah said, why are these things happening? Why are they not being unsolved? So maybe there's a fix in there where someone wants this to go on, where the city of New Iberia pass a tax, and the tax is for what? Of all purpose, to put a new law enforcement entity, a city police entity, which they had before, which people know they had many problems with that entity before they went to the sheriff department. Again, the thing is, Brother Darrell, it does not matter who's running law enforcement. It matters if honest people, good people are running law enforcement, and people who are going to deal with the community fairly. That's the thing that should matter. Passing another tax and taxing the black community. And the black community, they always fall for these things, Brother Darrell. They always fall for these things because we have so many killings. We could pass a tax. We fall for these things. So I want them people to know in New Iberia, you do not vote for that tax unless they got promised to put constraints on law enforcement, to have a community relation board, to have some kind of oversight, given that the New York Times and every major news article wrote negative things about law enforcement in Iberia Parish over the last 20 years. So we should not just fall for this open-dope. But still, black folk need to come together and see if we could solve our own issues with young people killing each other, people who look like them. But there are external forces at play there, and that's devastating. So I want to thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carl, and I definitely appreciate your call. And one of the things that Sister Deborah brought up was the fact that they would arrest a blood and drop him off in a Crip neighborhood, and arrest a Crip and drop him off in a blood neighborhood to start the feuds going in Los Angeles. And so these outside forces do believe that they have a vested interest in our continued division and conflict. That's just a fact. And there are a lot of times, even in Missouri, there are activists that have been found dead, murdered in burned cars, and we believe that nefarious members of the police community are absolutely involved in those things because they are targeting the killing of leaders, grassroots leaders in the streets. And of course, these murders are quote unquote unsolved. And just because something is unsolved doesn't mean that it's unknown. Now, of course, when you look at what's on the screen, you see that officer that was acquitted in St. Louis, and of course you see the man who he murdered. Him with his little beautiful young daughter, and apparently he, according to what the prosecution alleges, that he planted the gun on the person after killing him. Somehow the judge, even with with DNA and fingerprints only from the officer on the gun, somehow the judge was not able to, beyond a reasonable doubt, find him guilty. Yet each and every day, people who are addicted to crack, people who are addicted to heroin, people who have felony records as long as your arm, who were beat into lying very often times, tasered in the police station and get up there and testify, or they're looking at 50 years. These people testify, and for some reason a lot of these judges have no problem in finding people guilty on the testimony of crack and heroin addicted homeless people that are testifying against people, and later on we find out that they're innocent. These jailhouse informants, supposedly, People who say that they heard you say something in jail lie on you, and before you know it, you're convicted of some murder that you didn't even do. And so they're able to find people guilty beyond a reasonable doubt with a lot less evidence and with a lot less credible evidence each and every day. And we're talking about people doing life in prison, and later on their convictions overturned due to DNA evidence. Now, there's supposed to be a white man running around Baton Rouge, whacking people, just whacking black people. I believe they've linked a gun to 2 murders through ballistics, and the description is that it's a white person. We don't know exactly who it is, what it is. They have picked up a person of interest, they call him, and they're looking into whether or not this person was actually doing the killing or not. They actually don't know, according to what they say. Now, of course, they're being very cautious with white suspects, and that they're not even calling him. They're calling him a person of interest. They're not even going full scale with suspect. So they're very, very careful when it comes to them picking up whites, but of course they're not so careful when it comes to blacks. But I want to deal with our community and the brotherhood that we should have, and this fratricidal violence, how it is so easy for us to shoot and kill one another.
Well, I just want to bring this in before you
Well,
you deal with that.
Go ahead.
Is that you said in your opening that a lot of these quote unquote murders in our community are going unsolved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, black people have been painted as the face of violence. Perhaps, just perhaps, we may be buying in to the propaganda that we are the face of violence. It is possible. I'm not saying that we know that, you know, we can cause some problems. But if we don't have these things that are solved and there's conclusive evidence that we are killing ourselves in every case. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be, you know, trying to make our communities decent places to live, and that there isn't black on black crime and or violence.
Well, I don't really like that term.
I know you say black on black, but normally
I don't really like that term.
Normally, when they find someone who is killed by a black person, usually it's another black person. If it's a white person that's murdered, usually it's another white person or an Asian person. So normally you're gonna murder the person that's closest to you.
Yeah, people in within your race.
So I'm just saying that I'm using that, not that that's the only people that have fratricidal, you know.
Well, the thing I'm coming at, Sister Deborah,
yes, sir,
is that, you know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has called on us, and he hadn't really dealt with so much outside forces, but us and our lack of love for one another that causes us to go out and for whether it's the Gangster Disciples against the Moes in Chicago, whether it's the Bloods against the Crips in numerous cities, no matter what it is, very often, and even in Baton Rouge, you find these conflicts between one neighborhood and another. Right. And we as black people don't control any of the neighborhoods that we're supposedly fighting, supposedly repping our hood, as we say, and we're willing to go all the way overseas and fight for others, and then we come back and shoot and kill a lot of times. Well, not say come back, but we shoot.
I don't think they're going.
Well, you're absolutely right. But the point I'm getting at is that as a people, we have to get a doctrine of self-love.
Absolutely.
We have so often the church has told us that we're going to hell if we don't love everybody.
Right.
And I reject that as a student of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I reject that as a notion that you got to love everybody, because right now the same people that teach you that are not speaking out against, what Trump is talking about doing with North Korea or in these other nations, bombing people and killing people who have never attacked America. But the thing that we've done is we've believed that some kind of way we gotta love everybody but ourselves. We gotta love white people. We gotta forgive white people. What about forgiving the wrongs and the ills that maybe we do to one another because of whatever character flaws? What about us talking things out among ourselves as a community? Because I don't buy the notion, of course, the propaganda that we are, the most violent people or whatever. Because keep in mind, the real war criminals live in the White House anyway. The real killers and murderers and thieves and dope dealers work in Langley, Virginia at the CIA headquarters. We know who the real criminals are who commit crime on a global scale. But in our community, we as black people cause too many funerals in our own community. We cause too many funerals. And it's those causing of funerals by us against us that is problematic. I understand that a lot of these murders are unsolved. I do understand that sometimes law enforcement and other people can be involved with some of these unsolved murders. But a lot of times, Sister Deborah, as well as these murders go unsolved because in their mind, it's just another black person. So the resources to solve that murder are not there. That happens all the time. And I used to have a friend who worked on the NOPD. He was a police officer for the New Orleans. And he said that when a white person is murdered, homicide and the resources for homicide puts to the solving of that murder is much greater than when it's just a poor black person. And that's just what it is. That's part of the reason why these murders are unsolved is because there's not the attention. Now, we know that one officer in Baton Rouge used the N-word and was out at a homicide and said, "I'm here with this dead N-word. It's my wife's birthday. I don't need to be out here with this dead white man." So it's a situation where they don't really view. And then one cop said, "We need to pick up the body and drop off another pack of bullets." They feel as though that they don't care about solving the murder because they want the murder to continue because it allows them to be justified in the hatred that they would have, whether justified or not. If we lived as a perfect, pristine people, because we were a very, very nice people, where the man and the woman were always in the home, where all of our children were born, quote unquote, in wedlock when we lived in Africa. But that did not stop them from coming over there and destroying villages, robbing us of the knowledge of self, robbing us of our name and our culture, and making us into Negroes, coons, and colored people. So their hatred is there. They are just looking for something to hang it on. But with respect to us, if we're upset at the fact that Alton Sterling was murdered by a white man, and all of us were upset by that, we should also be upset if one of our young men or two of our young men, dozens of our young men are murdered by other black people. And that is, to me, the issue. Because if Black Lives Matter, as I said before, they're going to have to matter to us first.
Well, I absolutely agree. I mean, you can't argue with the truth, okay? However, what I will say, I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to go back to what I'm going to say. Where we start, I believe, is that we should follow the money. They always say follow the money. And who benefits from black people being killed?
Good question.
Who benefits from people going to jail being framed with murders. Who gets the money when they put the bodies in the ground? We know that these small black-owned funeral homes have been bought up by corporations. Okay? We know that the prison industrial complex, is traded on the stock market. We know, just like, and I heard this said recently, that war is big business. We always think that war is on a foreign soil.
No, it's right here every day.
And that's what I'm saying. When you go into some of these neighborhoods, it sounds like you're in a war zone sometimes. You hear gunfire. And who calls the police?
And you are in a war zone.
So
that's
my
the thing.
point is that sometimes you don't understand. It's like the analogy of the frog that's in a pot. Of course, if you put it in a hot pot, you'll boil in water and jump out, or try to jump out. But when you just turn it up gradually, you don't even realize that you're in the middle of a war zone that is being controlled by outside forces, and you, as the victim, begin to see, your brother, your sister, as your adversary, as an artificially, controlled project scenario. So what I'm saying, or what I'm suggesting, that perhaps, we have to see our brother and our sister as our brother and our sister. But maybe part of why we don't see our brother and our sister is because it is part of that pot being turned up. You have the education. Of course, part of the education system, when you look in the books, our history as black people begins with slavery. So we start off seeing ourselves as nothing, seeing ourselves as being tools that's used by the enemy. And then, of course, as you go throughout history, you have Birth of a Nation, where, and then what's different between the movie Birth of a Nation and Boys in the Hood? What's the difference between that and Menace of Society? It's just another modern, up-to-date way of showing black people as, oversexed, violent. And so, who's going to these movies? Middle-class white people going to see Boys in the Hood? Who's going to go see Belly? No, it's us. And so we believe most of what we see. And so we start taking on the consciousness that we are, in fact, what they have told us. Not saying that we're not acting out the script, because in many cases we are acting out the script. But the thing is that we have to go at the root of this thing. This thing is bigger than us. This thing is bigger than, Pookie and Man in the hood. This thing goes deep, and if you follow the money, you'll find where the path ends. So the other part of it is that what is our responsibility? We have a man in our midst that have shown us conclusively what the root of the problem is. It Absolutely. Is up to us, the ones who can see what is going on, that we have to continue to uphold the light, to expose the plots and the machinations of the enemy. And we're responsible for that. So educating our people to the truth, exposing and fighting against them with that weapon of truth, that we have to continue to do it. And that's by exposing the lies.
Absolutely. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air with the Community Defender.
Yes, good evening, Sister Deborah and Brother Darrell.
Good evening.
Hey, very, very good program y'all having on today. I'll always say y'all speak truth to power, even though some people don't understand the truth because of the falsism that we have been taught along the way in our upbringing. And when people open their eyes and start realizing that this is the truth and the truth shall be told, I have a problem with a lot of things. One of the things I have a problem with is the churches. The churches teach you to love Jesus and not one another or love yourself, like Minister LUS Farrakhan teaches. Minister Farrakhan teaches to love yourself, and if you're loving yourself, you can know how to love your brother. You know, in a lot of households, you don't have parents telling their kids they love them. You know, you walk around on the streets today and you tell some brother, you know, hey man, love you. Hey, look man, I don't play that. You know, because they're not taught to love themselves or to love one another. And it's more to love than making love. And this is what a lot of us as black folks don't understand. And I feel like this here. If parents would take their kids, instead of buying them all this garbage, $200 tennis shoes, and all these video games and $500 telephones, and learn how to teach their kids that they love them more than all this other old, how I can say that, rigmarole that society is trying to put in their mind and in their heart. Love, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of the three is love, and this is what we're not understanding. I watch you guys all the time. Keep up the good work. I always say, keep throwing the brick in the graveyard. Somebody might throw it back one day. All right.
Thank you, brother.
Guys.
God bless you. Now, he made a number of good points, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said years ago that there's no love for self, that it was a grave handicap among our people, that we did not have the love for self.
That's right.
Now, to me, Black Lives Matter, and they matter enough not just for us to deal with the issues when it's a white police officer, but when it is us killing us, no matter what color the hand is that pulls the trigger, you're still just as dead. And that's a point I wanted to make. It doesn't matter what color the hand was that pulled the trigger. If you're dead, you're dead. And you don't have, your family does not have you. So whether it's G Money or Alton Sterling, whether it's Chauncey Thomas or Freddie Gray or Mike Brown, or some other brother who is murdered in Chicago, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, or even New Iberia. It's something that we as a community can save lives if we learn to love one another. We've been taught to love everybody.
So the question is, how do you learn to love one another? How do you learn to love yourself?
Let me make this point. Now, everything was gradually learned. So it's going to have to be gradually unlearned. Now, one thing that black people lack, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad Honorable Louis Farrakhan said, we lack the knowledge of self. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan said, when you know yourself, you will absolutely fall in love with yourself. So, do we know that God himself has chosen us to build a new world with? Do we know that we are the direct descendants of Almighty God, Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth? Not anything spooky, but the very material that he was made of in the very beginning is the same material that I am created out of in this time. And that the essence of him is what he also put in me. So, we always used to say it in the church. How can you love God whom you've never seen and don't love your brother who you see every day? And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, when you look at a black man or you look at a black woman, you are looking at God. And that's something that we have not wrapped our minds around. But one thing I never wanted to do, and I said it on my Facebook post, and that is to cause an unnecessary funeral. Because when you go to these funerals where somebody has been shot, whether it's at a club or in a parking lot or just murdered in a shooter, whatever it is, and at that last moment, when everybody has gone and viewed the body, and they bring that mother to the side of that casket, the sound that you hear, which is a universal sound, coming from the mother of that child, it's such a horrible sound that for days you can't get it out of your ear, because it's the sound of such a deep grief, such a deep despair, that it's unimaginable. You know, you would have to see it to know it, but once you know it, you never want to know it again. And so, you know, let's talk things over. Let's mediate disputes. And those of us in the religious community, let's go where the problem is. You can't stay in the four walls of the church with young men blowing each other away, with the police manipulating differences between one community and the other, with their snitches and their little tools that they use to spread rumors around. Louis Farrakhan said that the CIA was sent into the black community to work among the gangs after the fall of the Iron Curtain. That they've been working night and day, as you said, we talked about outside forces, to cause conflict.
And I just
but we are going to have to be the people that solve it.
It just occurred to me, it just hit my mind that today is the anniversary of an experience that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had, where in that experience that it was revealed to him that the United States government, starting with Ronald Reagan back in the 80s, had a plot to take down Libya at the time, and Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. And in that experience, he was revealed that it was a greater plot that was aimed at a larger nation, that was aimed at a smaller nation within the United States, which was the Nation of Islam. And inside of that plot, there was another plot that was unfolded by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan through this experience, and it was the plot against the destruction of the black communities through the black youth.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And at that time, that's when, you had the crack cocaine coming into the communities. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had a press conference at the Washington Press Club in Washington, D.C., and unfolded the plot before it happened, and then subsequently found the evidence that the Joint Chiefs of Staff did in fact meet during that same time that this experience occurred, and had planned a war with Libya, but that war was to extend over to the United States, all the way into the black community. Once again, going back to what I said, that when we look at war on foreign soil, because we're so close to it here, and because the propaganda, and the first thing in war is always a propaganda campaign.
That's right.
And so when we look at ourselves, and we see ourselves as N-words, and we see ourselves as criminals and savages, and all of these different things that we consider ourselves. Now, there's by no accident that in the rap community, the popular style of rap is mumble rap now, that makes people seem, like they're ignorant, unintelligible. All of this is part of the propaganda campaign to make us see ourselves as subhuman. And this is being pushed up, and has always been pushed up by the media. The corporate-run media has been pushed up by the government at the highest levels, and we have to wake up. That's what we're doing now. That's how we combat it. The first thing is that we have to expose what's going on, and we have to begin to start educating ourselves to what is happening. And then we must re-educate ourselves to see ourselves in a different light, because we are not savages. We've been made that by circumstances, and we're acting like savages, but our nature is absolutely God's.
And the thing I would say is that we were kidnapped by a savage. Anybody that goes to your country and blows up your villages and grabs you, throws you on a
And
boat,
still doing that today.
and grabs you and brings you over here and strips you of your name, your culture, your religion,
humanity.
your God, your humanity. And that is the
That's
people
a
who
savage.
kidnapped us were savages. And so the founding fathers who owned slaves, they were savages.
Right.
So and demons, as a matter of fact. The founding fathers who owned slaves were actually demons. One of the things that President Trump
Satanic.
one of the things that President Trump pointed out, because he was saying, well, you want to take down the statue of Robert E. Lee. I mean, even George Washington, he was a slaveholder.
Yeah. He said, what do you do? Get rid of our
Get
history?
get rid of our history. So, I mean, look at it. What was he saying? He was saying everybody's a demon. You're not going to be able to honor anybody. So what he was saying indirectly is that the entire country was founded by a bunch of slave-owning racist demons, and we have to keep it all. We have to keep all of our history. So he's very proud of the demonic foundations of America, and he's very, very proud of the demonic activities of America even today.
Why wouldn't a demon be proud of his history?
There you go.
His demonic history.
That's what it would be. So it's a situation to where we live in an era to where separation is bound to come to our people. We are going to separate. White folks are creating conditions that will not allow us to, first of all, we're out of the mainstream anyway, but we're going to be completely dislodged by those circumstances, whether we like it or not.
Well, separation is not an option. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on October 15th is going to deliver a speech called Separation or what?
Or death.
Or death. So it's not an option. You know, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about separation being the best and only solution to our problem. It's not even an option. And when you only have one, choice, then it really...
Yeah, and keep in mind, a lot of people are thinking about some things, but in reality, the circumstances are such that the dream of integration, even for those people who desire it, even for those people who are themselves made comfortable, is becoming clear that it is and always will be just that, a dream, or what we would call a nightmare. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan put out something, a song that said a white man's heaven is a black man's hell. And that's what we've been dealing with for these 460 plus years, is an absolute hell for our people. Those of us who are relatively comfortable materially, we know we can't even say what we want to say. We can't do what we want to do because we know we're under stress. Our blood pressure is up. Those of you sometimes with PhDs have high blood pressure, high stress, because you feel as though you can't say or do certain things because something's going to happen to make you uncomfortably materially. And so you try not to conform to what God says. You try to conform to the status quo. And conforming to the status quo is the opposite of conforming to what God would want or what God would desire. So you end up being away from what God would desire. Now it looks like we're coming to the closing moments of our program. I want us to love one another, and we're going to do a part 2 to this with some additional information and insight that we want to provide here at the Community Defender. And we would, of course, ask. Okay.
Some action plans. We
Right.
want to deal with some solutions. We have a few minutes to really.
Right.
be able
Okay.
to-
I was looking. I guess I was reading the timer. We have about around 6 minutes. But the thing that we want to do is to offer, not only to highlight the problem, but we want to offer solutions to the problem.
Right.
And I think that our lack of love for self, us easily being divided and not really taking ourselves serious. I'm going to give you an example, contemporary example. Colin Kaepernick made a kneel to make a stand to highlight a very real problem in the way that blacks and Latinos are treated in America. Now, he was ridiculed and scorned by the powers that be, but continued to do what he was doing. Now, he is unemployed by the NFL. Now, some people are saying, well, let's boycott the NFL because of what they did to Colin Kaepernick. But keep in mind, we should have boycotted the NFL for what they did to Michael Vick, blaming him for some dog stuff. We should have, the NFL should have been boycotted a long time ago by black people. And let me just say this, if we were unified, what happened to Colin Kaepernick would not be able to happen if we were unified. Now, people are on Facebook already talking about what's going to happen with Green Bay, what's going to happen with this, what's going to happen with that. We've already gone back to sleep after somebody has lost millions of dollars to make a statement. Muhammad Ali did something very similar. Now, the difference with Muhammad Ali is Muhammad Ali had the belt. And because he had the belt and that he was the draw for the ticket sales and the satellite, they had to come to him. If Colin Kaepernick took a knee and he was the heavyweight champion of the world, everybody would have to come to him anyway. But the point I'm getting across is, by him being one player, just one player, he can be isolated. And for us as a black community to go back to sleep and allow his isolation to occur, and us give our money, give our time, wear jerseys with the NFL, when the NFL have made a racist move against a person trying to do the right thing, and the NFL is upholding white supremacy. You have your muscle-bound slaves on the field. They used to be in the field, but now they're on the field, playing a sport. They used to be picking cotton, now they're throwing a ball, working for plantation owners. And that's pretty much what it is. And we have gone back to sleep as a result of that. We keep up a protest and then we go back to sleep. Sustained unity is what it's going to take for us to overcome these problems. A protest for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months, that's not going to do it. We have to spend our money among ourselves, boycott our Christmas spending, do a sustained campaign that hurts the enemy economically in order for you to be able to. There's no incentive for the enemy to stop his injustice to black people. Not one incentive have we provided. A protest is not an incentive.
I want to bring one of the solutions a little closer to home. There are some things that we can do. If we know that we're not getting an adequate education, what we can begin to start doing in our churches and even, in home groups or whatever, is that we can start Saturday school programs as enrichment programs for our children that teach us about our history from our perspective. That's one way to start. As Brother Darrell said, you find a black-owned business, you go by with your black-owned business, and you begin to start where you are. And of course, with the NFL, that is that's one level. Us coming together on that level, but we can make an effect right in our homes. I mean, even if you don't have a group of people that want to get together as parents, we can, offer our children. We can, even with YouTube and on the internet, there's so many resources that we could go to. We have to begin to start where we are to change our reality. And of course, gaining a knowledge of self, not just a knowledge of self, but a thorough knowledge of self is one way that we can begin to start changing our perspective on, who we are and whose we are, so that we can begin to start treating ourselves as, God would have us treat ourselves.
And I'm going to say white supremacy would not be effective if the people that the supremacy is directed against were not internalizing.
Right.
White supremacy is only effective when you believe it.
That's right.
Once you believe that you're inferior and you believe that they're better, that's when they got you.
Which is
that's when you're
goes to
done
the
for.
point. You learn your history, but you have to learn their history. And Donald Trump did something that was very good when he talked about the founding fathers were slave owners. We know that. But, you know, of course, the way that they slant history, they make them the patriots, you know, the patriots. And they make everything seem like, you know, that whatever they did was justified because they built a country, you know, for white folks, and white folks uphold them in this. And so I say that to say that we have to know our history first, and then we have to learn the true history of the Caucasian man and this country so that we will be better equipped to deflect their lies and machinations.
Absolutely, it's about reality versus rhetoric, you know, and that's a lot of times we've heard rhetoric, but we have to come face to face with the reality. We want to thank everybody for